I have a few questions to get us started that were helpfully put together by our education team at Stratford, but I'm hoping that we'll just do one or two of these and that you guys may have some questions to get us going. Here we go. Alexis, what does representation mean to you as both an artist and an audience member of color?
Yeah, we're going right in. We started to talk about this sort of over dinner. I talked about my initial interest in theater, rooting in singing for me. I was in choirs in high school, and that's sort of how I eventually fell into musical theater, and theater was through singing. And I was a camper when I was 16, and I went to a camp at the Stratford Festival called the Shakespeare School, and I got to see a play called Harlem Duet by Janet Sears, and it was an all-black cast. And as much as I'd loved singing, and I was like, this theater thing is neat, but I don't know if it's for me, I had never seen anyone who looked like me on the stage until that point. I thought theater was for skinny, pretty, petite white girls to dance around in musical theater and sing pretty songs, and so I was like, oh, okay, oh, that's not for me. And then I saw this all-black ensemble with curvy, beautiful, strong women, and I went, oh, okay, maybe I can do this thing. Since then, in 2015, I did Carousel, and my face was on a poster, and the amount of people that came up to me saying, I saw a black woman on a poster at Stratford, and I got in my car and drove here, was really, really amazing to hear, because that was so similar to my own experience of, oh, this isn't for me, this isn't for, oh, this person looks like me, I'm interested, I'm seeing me, I'm seeing a fraction of me, I'm seeing a fraction of my history, I'm able to piece my identity together because someone's showing me what I haven't seen before. To know that I'm able to then give that back to someone else is kind of everything, I think. And it's through Stratford that I've been able to do it, so it's absolutely a passion of mine to, I know I wouldn't be here without the women before me, the black women before me, inspiring me, so to be able to pass that on and to give that on is everything to me, especially for theater.
Thank you. Stratford is a classical theater with Shakespeare at its core. All three of these artists have done a lot of Shakespeare, and all three of you have done musicals. But you sing.
Single threat. I may be strong, but I'm a single threat.
That's all
It's a good threat, though.
The classical theater canon and the traditional musical theater canon both historically favor a white, privileged male perspective. How has that impacted your work as artists, and what's the value in continually telling these classics over and over again in the theater? André?
It's a big question. Well, something that I guess we start talking about in the other room is sometimes people use the word colorblind casting, and people say, yeah, we're going to cast this blindly. And sometimes, I know for me, I step onto a stage and people immediately see, like, I'm 6'2", 250, I'm a big black guy. So I'm not, like, I don't walk onto the stage. Like, sure, sometimes I might have to play somebody with a British accent, but I'm never trying to be a white person with a British accent. So, yeah, and then leading off from that is colorblind casting, and then people saying, I don't see color. Those are certain, that phrase I find kind of problematic, because for me as a person of color, I don't have an opportunity to live in that world that that person is living in. As they say, I don't see colors. That's great for you, but that's not the world we live in. And I think with casting, if we can take it as an opportunity to, what's the word, what's the phrase, cast, color cost, Jesus, can't even, that's it. But you know, then you have an opportunity to actually maybe take something on. As opposed to trying to erase issues by by casting blindly. And I have a hard time with that because as soon as I step into a world and I see or hear an issue trying to signal something's going on back here, it's like, I see it. If I can see it as plain as day, everybody else will. So even though we can try and sanitize something and give a Disney version of something, there's still a certain level of something that we're not taking on. And I feel like the world that we live in today, we have to be brave and take those issues on, because we have a lot of people who can turn their thoughts off, turn their minds off, even close their eyes to the world that they're actually living in so that they don't actually have to face it. And for me as an artist, as an actor, over the last couple of years, the last 2 years working at the Shaw Festival, I've had to do 2 racially charged plays, and even still, seeing after that, some people still be able to say, oh, it was terrible way back when. I was like, no. I think you're missing the point as to why we're still doing this play, as to why it's still necessary to do this play, is because that thing that you say isn't there is still here today. And what's interesting about Coriolanus as well, with our current climate, political climate, and the nature of our world right now, I'm interested to see how this particular play registers down here. And I don't know. I may have swayed off of the initial.
One of the things that I always say when people sort of question the importance of revisiting the classics, Shakespeare's work, or even the classical musical theater canon, which of course is much more contemporary, these great works of art, we're taught, are intended to illuminate something about human nature. And the amazing thing about these works is that human nature hasn't really changed that much, and humans do horrible things to each other for all kinds of terrible, terrible reasons. But I'm always struck watching the Shakespeare plays, watching the Greek tragedies, watching the sort of work that we do at Stratford, that these artists were, no matter how many centuries or millennia ago they were writing, they were finding something essential about who we are. And there's something sort of wonderfully universal about that. But the amazing thing is how a given production of a particular production of any given play can find different specificities for the setting, for the characters, for the casting. Graham, having spent your life, a good chunk of your adult life doing these plays, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. I didn't think I was going to be up here, so my socks don't match. I apologize for that. No. Yes, I suppose. My name is Graham Robert Thompson Abbey. So I am the poster boy of white straight man. So I'm.
That's been a good career for you.
Yeah, it has. And I'm on a big learning curve, so which is fantastic. I would only say I try. I've spent my life in Shakespeare, and so that's been a massive learning curve because I go back I've done 20 years at Stratford and go back to the time when we started to go through the phase of colorblind, and hearing all the people at the stage door say, well, I liked it, but I didn't understand why the father was white and the child was black. And then that sort of faded away. It's just interesting to watch the evolution. So in my companies, with my company in Toronto, I've explored Shakespeare. We just finished doing a female Lear that I directed with Shauna McKenna playing Lear. And before that did a Measure for Measure where I changed the Duke to a Duchess. And so both of those are putting a gender lens on those plays. But I would say it was a fascinating discovery for me because I had no preconceived notion as to why I'm casting a female Lear. I didn't have an idea other than I had a fantastic actress who I knew could play this. But when you put that lens on that play, and I suppose this works with diversity as well, you get all these new colors that come through the lens that you don't anticipate. Lear, just as an example, when you tell that through a maternal story as opposed to a paternal story, which we're used to, all sorts of colors come out in that play that are extraordinary. A mother cursing her daughter's womb, or the sexuality of Lear in the madness, which through a male gaze has always been sort of dirty and raw, became, in Shauna's way, a celebration of female sexuality through a woman that had always been forced to repress it because she was a ruler. So I just, when you ask that question, that stuff comes to mind for me. I'll just tell one other story for what it's worth. I adapted the history cycle a few years ago, the first half, into a thing we called Breath of Kings, which was Richard II, the two parts of Henry IV and Henry V in 2 nights. And we cast the first, we cast a young black man, Uriah Mengesha, to play Henry, which was the first casting of a black man playing one of these English kings in the history of Stratford. And that was, I went through a lot with Uriah talking about, listening to him tell me about the pressure that was on him and how he not only takes on a massive role, but he takes on, people are sort of watching him and saying, let's see. But I had one amazing story that was eye-opening for me, which just tells me the gap, at least in our little town. We talked about how we're doing this stuff on our stages. So Uriah had just played Henry V and Hal in the same day. And he was leaving the theater and he ran across the main street. And we saw him from a distance fall. I thought he got hit. And he crawled to the other side of the street, and a bunch of us, I don't know if I told you this story, I think I told you maybe. A bunch of us chased him across the street, thinking he got hit by a car. And he was, when I got over there were about 4 senior white ladies that are patrons of ours that were standing around not doing anything. And we checked if he was okay, and he was all right. He just turned his ankle or something. And one of the women said to me, she said, are you Graham Abbey? I've seen you in all these plays. And I said, yeah, I am. We're trying to help our buddy here. And without missing a breath, she said, we saw him there. We thought he was on drugs. And to me, in a moment, I was like, I just spent 6 hours in the theater with this amazing young man playing a king, man. And all I could say to them was, he just played the King of England. But that's the gap. I guess when you come out the theater doors, I was hit with that gap of our perception of how what we're doing on stage still doesn't match with what's gelling outside our theaters, I guess.
Right.
That's...
Well, and yeah, and the one thing that Uriah said to you is the pressure of taking it on, and the same thing for me coming back, because I've been away from Stratford for 9 years, and then coming back to play Coriolanus, which is one play that the festival's only done. This is the 5th time in 66 years. So, it's a hard play. Black man stepping in, I do not have the opportunity to fail. So, me stepping into it means I have to do whatever I can to make this succeed. And just so that just because I know that there's people just like, well, black man's gonna play. Let's see what he can do. Let's see if he can show up and do the thing, and or people just looking for if I don't, it's be like, see, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So let's go back to the way we used to do it. So this is the challenge I'm taking on as I'm taking a part like this. Is it's like, okay, I have an opportunity to take on this amazing part, but also to maybe open up some people's minds. And I guess that's what, for me, the power of the theater has been over the past few years, is trying to take on these plays to show our audiences, to show everybody that we are people too. Well, you know, and I the one thing about North America right now is people have bought into capitalism so much that you basically don't care about your neighbor next to you. And that's one thing that's really hard to deal with, you know, and it's, you know, and one thing that's really apparent right now is with the world, if something's going on and it's like, oh, if I had the time, I would protest that, you know, I would go out and protest, but this bill is due on Thursday, and if I don't show up to work, then I can't do that. You know, so it forces us forces everybody into a box to kind of focus in on themselves and their own priorities, as opposed to being able to, like, one of the lines it was in one of the 3 plays that we're doing this year in Napoli, when Tom says, if we can't look out for one another, then if we can't look out for one another, then it's basically lost our sense of humanity. And where we are right now, we're not really looking out for each other. And we need to keep that connection, that connection between genders, between race, between ages, just to talk to one another, because yeah, I don't know, the world, we have a lot of work to do. So it's just, you know, so with taking on these plays, taking on the opportunity to do something, to open somebody's mind to something new, that they might have a conversation with somebody that they might not have had a conversation with before, as opposed to like, oh, someone tripped. You on drugs, young man? You know, and it's sad that that's the first place that they go to.
Stratford, if you haven't had the chance to come, is a beautiful, bucolic, small community. It's about 32,000 people, and it's about 2 hours from a city of any size. And arriving in Hanover today sort of felt very familiar in that way. And look, at Stratford we're trying, but we are by no means paragons of inclusive casting or equity. But it was an interesting season this year because we had André playing Coriolanus. We also had a black man playing Harold Hill in The Music Man, who was unbelievable. And we did a comedy of errors that was set in a gender fluid community with both pairs of twins being played by people of color and different genders. And we were super proud of this as a season, and the season did spectacularly well for us, which is really, really encouraging. And yet, I'm very aware of the fact that we had a handful of very public racist incidents in our little peaceful Canadian community that hasn't come up hasn't really been as prevalent in our little bubble before. And as we talk about it, we can't help but wonder if it isn't a sort of a reaction to what it is that we're doing on our stages that we would like to think is going in the right direction.
But I thought it was such a, unfortunately there was an article posted online that was essentially like, what happened to the good old white people plays? Like, why are we doing this gender bending thing?
yes, that
Why are
one.
we putting the race in and the Stratford Festival responded so wonderfully saying, we are so proud to have done exactly what we did and to infuriate this type of people because we will not listen to them. And we will take this article and we will throw it in the garbage because we're not changing our ways and we will keep pushing those buttons. Because when I hear that, I go, oh God, okay, they'll never cast a black guy as Harold Hill again, and they'll never cast oh crap, like are they gonna regret their decisions? But the festival went like, great, we're pushing the right buttons then. And that was, we got a company-wide email saying, so sorry that you guys had to read that, but that was disgusting and unfortunate, and we are very proud of the community we're building at this diverse gender. It was the biggest honor to do The Tempest with Martha Henry as Prospero this year, a female Prospero. How many years ago did she play Miranda on that very stage? 46 years ago she played Miranda. Like, she never dreamed that she could then, in turn, come back as Prospero. So closing night, I was just, like, weeping that a woman gets to, it's a big honor. And, like, what a big deal to be a female on that stage. Yeah.
But full disclosure, there was this horrible article in the newspaper in Kitchener, Waterloo, which is... And we sent out this company-wide email, which I'm glad you appreciated. But we had a huge debate in the office about whether we were going to write back to the paper, and ended up feeling like it was such trash that we didn't even want to dignify it with a response. But I could just as easily have made the opposite argument that by not publicly repudiating it, we were making a mistake. And then the day was sort of saved because thankfully one of our patrons wrote a letter back to the paper saying all of the things that we would have said if we had written to them. So it sort of had a happy ending, but it was a judgment call that was a tough one. Does anybody have any questions?
So, it's interesting you mention this because I think a lot of Americans assume that everything is better in Canada.
It is.
We have healthcare.
Based on your experiences in American and Canadian performing arts, what's different, not just in issues of casting, but in issues of sensitivity in rehearsal processes, whether boorish, unprofessional behavior from artistic leadership is acceptable, issues like that, how it's different in Canada, or if it's not.
I think every room is different. Every director is different. But I think now within the last couple of years, and especially with like the Me Too stuff happening, it has changed a certain temperature in how the rehearsal hall rooms operate. Because it's not just about abuse of a sexual nature anymore, it's just about emotional abuse as well. So I've only worked downstate sides a couple of times, so I can't really speak to what experiences are like here, but I can only speak in regards to the Canadian experiences, or my own particular Canadian experiences. But I think over the last couple of years, I think over at least the past few years that I've been working, some people who I may have worked with earlier on who may have been a different person as they were younger, but now realizing that, you know, if I bring a positive energy to the room, it actually makes a difference. But as soon as that negative energy comes in, people start shutting down. They stop taking risks because they're afraid to make mistakes. And I feel like in rehearsal, you have to make the mistakes to be able to get to the true nuggets of gold. So yeah, that was the wrong choice, but there might have been an essence of something in it that can lead you to the next thing. You know what I mean? Well, yeah, it just depends, because a certain person I remember working with was just not nice. And I felt like the room was just cold all the time, and anybody would be afraid to speak up just to for the fear of being violently shut down. And I feel like it has a result in the final product, right? So it doesn't really help the process at all. But if you have a room that is warm, that can be dangerous, you know, warm, safe, that you can be risky enough to make those crazy choices, then you have the opportunity to really play, to have an opportunity to make an experience for your audience that will really sing.
We sort of touched on at dinner too, because I mean, we all have our own individual experiences, and like André said, it's going to be the people and the personalities. There are bad directors everywhere, unfortunately, and great ones too. But I think what maybe the States and Canada can learn, I think we can learn from each other. I was saying there's no sort of celebrity system in Canada. We're all sort of like, oh yes, we're all so proud, and so we're going to sit over here and maybe support them here and there. Whereas like Americans are like, we have Patti LuPone. Like the Americans are very proud, and there's a star system, and there's a consistent support, and like it took Justin Bieber to go to the States to get famous, right? Like that's sort of the mindset of where we
You
go.
all
Like,
know Justin Bieber is from Stratford.
he's from Stratford. You can get a T-shirt that says "To Bieber" or "Not to Bieber." I'm not even joking. Those are available in Stratford. So that sort of community and support and excitement around theater. There's such a strong history of theater, and you can list the decades, and I come from a musical theater background too, so to know each, like what the 20s look like in musical theater, 30s, 50s, like Canada's a bit younger. We don't quite have that sort of structure, which can be frustrating to sort of trace Black history roots in Canada. We don't really get what that is, and we borrow a lot from American theater culture, which we do anyways, but in that way too, it's a bit muddled, where I wish there was a bit more clarity in Canadian theater history. Yeah, sure. Heck yes. But I think, I don't know, I think theater's changed so much since then too. Victor Garber is from my hometown though, yeah. Yeah, I'll take that, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, he went to the States and got famous, right? Like that's another example. And Eugene Levy, he was in that cast too. And then now he's, yeah. It's interesting. I think we can learn a lot from each other and share.
We're not really good at show business in Canada. We make art, but we don't make show business.
And we're very particular that it's a creative, and it can be outlandish, absolutely. But Toronto is all about the independent theater scene. It's all about the art and the community instead of the glitz and the glam and the lights and the There you go.
Yesterday, I saw the HD video of the show from a main stage theater, 3 years ago, something like that, from the festival, the theater stage. And I thought, okay, they've cast a Black woman for the role of Bianca. This is some button pushing going on here, because, Bianca means white. And and I think the last line of the play, Petruchio says, you've all successfully wed, you're set, but I've hit the white. I mean, I think in some ways that's really important button pushing, and I'm thankful to Shakespeare's plays and verse that it's so durable. It takes, it doesn't just absorb this kind of button pushing, it actually sparkles, or what's the word you used, André? Colors.
Right.
You get color. And then I thought, I thought back to your performance of, I was always comparing you to Ray Fiennes, of course, back and forth.
Not trying to be him
No,
at the same
no,
time.
no. But when Ray Fiennes calls people slaves and fragments, that's a completely different thing from watching you call people slaves and fragments.
Yeah.
You must have worked really hard on that, and with the company too, yeah?
Well, I think with that one is just kind of like for him realizing what type of person he wants to be. He's, as a soldier, he will not, okay, common people, you can hang them. You will never hang Coriolanus. That's not the way he wants to go out. You can say, pull me about my ears, quarter me by horses or all those sort of things, but the one thing he doesn't say about himself and the way he's going to die is by hanging. It's not. But for the common people, yes. So so that's why he always lashes out when in a moment of, let's try you right now, and you're guilty of this, and it's like, nope, I'm dying here, come at me now, because the one thing he doesn't want is to be lynched up and hanged, because he wants to die as a soldier, as opposed to the other way.
And I think the character has, he's hard to like, but he has more integrity than any other character in the play. He can't dissemble his contempt for the people. He just can't do it.
Right.
And I really like that.
Well, it's a complicated play, though. Like, who are the heroes and who are the villains in that one, right? So it's not as black and white. A lot of people navigate in the gray area. He doesn't.
So you're playing that role lights that text up in ways that it never lit up for me.
Thank you.
Well, to touch on an earlier question, I think that's the only way we should be doing Shakespeare. Shakespeare was not written for me. It was not written initially for a woman of color. It was written for white men and boys. And I think if we do anything like that, then I don't understand why we're doing it, because we've done that, and we've done that for 400 years. I think that we need to put in faces that we see on the subway. I think in everyday communities, we need to challenge those roles, because the themes in the plays are absolutely human and universal to us, and we are cyclical by nature, humans. So we see themes and we go, oh God, no, we haven't changed. Or we go, oh, we changed a tiny bit, maybe, hopefully. But the whole beauty is that it should be challenged. I think we should, yeah. I'm a strong believer in. A lot of people who've seen Coriolanus especially have been like, oh, I wouldn't call it the be-all, end-all Coriolanus, or, oh, like, I loved it, but it was very, like, Robert Lepage. And I think that's the whole point of Shakespeare. It's never to be, this is the be-all, end-all, this is so-and-so's Coriolanus. This is Robert Lepage's Coriolanus. This is his view. This is our view. This is our version of what this story means to us in 2018 right now. I think that's exactly what it should be, and that's how we push it into the future and keep it alive. Or we should bury it, because if it's not speaking to us and challenging us, I think that's the overall surprising thing with the production too, is people leave going like, I understood everything. Like, I saw Coriolanus 10 years ago and I didn't understand a word of it. This one, they're actually like, oh, that's what oh, wow. And people leave thinking, where they'd normally leave intimidated and being like, I guess I should read the Coles notes. Like, I missed that. Like, they're leaving going, that was really messed up, and I need to think about that. And I think that's what theater should be doing.
Right.
It's also in some ways, inclusive casting is for 2018 what doing Shakespeare in modern dress and in different settings has been for decades and decades. And don't get me wrong, at Stratford we still get letters every single season asking why we don't do all of the Shakespeares in traditional Elizabethan dress with ruffs and pumpkin pants. And in fact, when the Stratford Festival was founded in 1953, they did 2 plays in the tent that first summer and one of them was in modern dress. So it's never been what Stratford is about.
Right.
Other questions?
It's my understanding that Canadian theatre is much more friendly to collaborative, devised creation. It's more, and it's kind of going along with your points about that it doesn't depend so much on the star system. So we kind of have I have an image of Canadian theatre as being much more egalitarian. And I'd be, first of all, am I correct in that? Because you're looking a little down.
I'm thinking.
Well, it truly just depends on the room, right? It depends. I think we'd be proud to claim that, and I've had a lot of experiences in that realm, and I'm grateful for every single one of them. But that doesn't mean every director is perfectly within that method.
Yeah.
At the same time.
But I think it's a bit more, that's sort of the narrative that's set in the US, that Canadian theater artist is much more familiar and invested in collaborative devised performance, and the US is kind of slowly kind of lurching its way down that same path. But if, based on your experiences with that, I'd be curious to see how that intersects with racial politics, right? Like, do you see that, you know, I mean, it would seem that that mode would be more open. If it is more genuinely egalitarian, it would be more open to diversity, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think even that's still a process, as André was touching on. We're going through this period of time where, and as Graham mentioned, that colorblind casting was the thing 12 years ago, and we're like, yeah, we're colorblind casting, and they're like, okay, no, what is colorblind? Because we're still seeing my face as my face is. So how do we transition into a color conscious time? And I think that's where we are now. And I do think there are some people who think they're beyond that, and no, everyone's the same, and there's still people who have a dated perspective. Again, it truly depends who you work with and the company's sort of beliefs and where you are, perhaps, too. I was speaking about Toronto theater being such an indie theater. It's such an independent theater culture there. There are so many theater companies across the city, and it's such a wonderfully diverse city that you can see anything you want there, and that's amazing. It's so great, but that doesn't necessarily reflect in every single theater community in Ontario or Canada at the same time.
I do think that there is a genuine Canadian tradition of collective creation, and that's true. I will say, though, and I say this sort of looking at it through a producer lens, the process of that kind of creation takes a really long time, and a lot of that time and a lot of that work is done by very small companies. So in real world terms, a lot of that work is done for essentially little or no pay. And one of the things you find in the arts is that there is a privilege inherent in who has the ability to work for little or no pay for a long period of time to create something. So I would hesitate to say that history of collective creation, bless you, necessarily means that it's a more inclusive group of artists who are doing it.
I think that's always going to be the goal, but to say that I don't know. As a black artist in this business, there are still times I question if I got that role because of the diversity quota and what that means. I still struggle with that, and I don't think I will know in some cases, or you do wonder that, but it's also a business where you wonder if you did or didn't get the role because you're blonde. Like, our business is so ridiculous. Yeah. There are so many variables that to layer in my gender and to layer in my race as well is just another sort of daily weightlifting battle, I guess, where you do hope that eventually you find this beautiful community that wants you for your talent and wants you for your what you can bring to the table. And again, I think that is the goal, and you will find those people and those patterns and those directors, and they are there, but maybe not every single time. Yeah. You're still thinking.
No, I know.
So this is kind of a continuation of some of what we touched on at dinner, but I would like to hear a little bit more about your training and specifically as Black actors. Some of the work that I'm doing, I'm very interested in how Black actors train in the U.S. And I'm wondering, in Canada, has there been, because there's more of a movement now to really integrate more culturally specific techniques into the training process. When you are training as an actor in Canada, are you being exposed to works by and about Black authors? Are you encountering any theories and methods developed by Black people? And when you are training, are you given opportunities to perform in works by and about Black people, or is it predominantly white works?
I'll take this one. So, I went to George Brown College in Toronto, 3-year conservatory-style training program. I graduated 2004.
Just to know the time period.
Yeah. So when I went to that school, like it was weird. Where I grew up in Markham, which was just outside of Toronto, like I had everyone around me. White folks were the minority. And me going to theater school, all of a sudden I became the token Black guy.
In your class or in your whole program?
In my class. But then even still, the year ahead, there was just one other guy. Yes. And so that training program really focused on the classics. So I started off in my first year working with Shakespeare. And then I think we also had a Canadian scene study that year. And were any of them of color? No. And then second year, our big thing that we do is we do a kid show, which was The Wind in the Willows. And then our period study was the Restoration period. And then my graduating year, the 3 plays that we did was Pride and Prejudice, All's Well That Ends Well, The Imaginary Invalid, and Peer Gynt. So no. But at the same time, knowing that at the time, like as I was saying, over those 3 years that I was at George Brown, something I started to say to these guys downstairs is that every year we went to the Shaw Festival to see a show, and it wasn't until my 3rd year there, as I'm making my list of places that I would love to work, that I'm looking at the board of actors and artists that are working there, and they are all white. And I was like, can I work here? Am I allowed to work here? You know, and really seeing the nature of what our artistic climate was at the time. And I think even at Stratford at the time, there was some color. There was some color. And I graduated that year and then spent a year in Toronto, and then I got into the conservatory program at Stratford. And I spent 4 years there, but even in my time there, then they were still trying to figure out how to do it. And I wasn't quite sure then if they were just doing it to say, look at our stage, it's colorful. But for me personally, I had to step away for a while, and I had to go back to Toronto and hustle my way there, and because I trained to do those those festivals, to do the Shaw plays, to do the Shakespeares, to speak that language that had those long verses of thought, and bring them all together in an artistic sort of way or whatever. But I had to step away, and like I feel like over the time from from then till now, we've come a long way. There's still groundwork there's still work to be done, as we're talking about even right now, colorblind casting and color conscious casting, and maybe how we program seasons and what sort of plays we do on those stages to not just program to one particular audience, but to program to the world we actually live in. So, we still have some work, and yes, with training programs. I can tell you when I was in theater school, I learned Russian accent, Cockney, all those general ones that I never use. And as soon as I graduated, I had to teach myself, based on the training that I had from George Brown with learning the phonetic alphabet and everything like that, how to do a Jamaican accent, how to do an African accent. So I had to teach myself how to do that based on my own training. But nowadays, I find that you have more people of color who are going through the training and the training program trying to teach them those things. But now, I think that those students can now see that there's more people like them on our stages, that they're now saying, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Teacher, these accents I'm never going to use, so how about I focus on these ones? And I bring that to the table, and that's part of my training. So there's a different sort of, right now we have one of the guys who's in the conservatory is like, all of the coaches are white. I was like, yes, they are. Yes, they are. Learn whatever you can from them so that you can, if you want, be the next coach if you want. And I was like, yes, they are all white. They are all super highly trained. They've trained all over the place. And I love them. They're all amazing coaches. So soak up what you can from them so that if you want to be that person one day, you can. And add your own sort of flair on whatever it is. So it's an interesting time of transition where, yes, things may have been one particular way, and me personally seeing it for what it is, but also being able to take from it what I can to apply to myself to then bring into something new.
I went to the University of Windsor from 2008 to 2012. Same actually program that our artistic director, Anthony Cimolino, went through. It was very classical conservatory, Shakespeare classes, Shakespeare focus, restoration classes, Cockney accents, all of that. No plays by Blackworks, no training by Blackworks. Me and one other classmate were the two people of color when I first got there, I think in the entire program. And then 2 years later, another girl joined, and just ahead of us was a Joma, so just graduated out of the program. But when I got there, we were the only diversity quota. And so she kept pushing me, saying we have to create our own opportunities. So she had to push me a lot because I was not comfortable doing it. But we ended up writing a play in our last year. We called it For Those Who Stand Upon Our Shoulders. And it was essentially a sort of letter of our experience of the stereotypes we were facing in school and nervous to enter in the professional realm. And the most moving part about it was everyone saying, I had no idea that you were going through any of this. And I should probably reread it because it would be really interesting to look back because I was 20. But it didn't matter that it wasn't good because it was so personal, I think. And it was a lot of the fears, and a lot of it's been, not a lot, some of it's been dispelled. I do a lot of musical theater, but I am the Audra McDonald voice type, not the hairspray, gonna belt my face out, sing the gospel, color purple. I don't do that stuff, and everyone expects me to. So then I would get called out for auditions for those, and I would go, and they'd be like, "You're not what we're looking for," and I'd be like, "I know, I tried not to come, but you said, no, but you look like what we want, so come. And I've learned to turn those down and to stop auditioning for those things, and that's okay. There was a lot of shame in that, though, a lot of like, I have to learn how to do this, I have to learn, because that's what they expect of me. And I think my mom even was like, well, your hero is Audra McDonald. Like, she was the one who broke down those walls saying, look at this classically trained black singer. You continue that path that she's started to build for the future. And so that was a really big thing for me. Again, leaving the classical training community of Windsor and going out into the real world and going, oh God, like what am I looking to? These are what I've sort of been set up for. These are the little tastes, or like the film auditions. What did I have to say? I literally had to say like bust a cap. Yeah, they're like literally just something so archetypal and horrible. I was like, dear agent, no, I can't. Like this, I talk like a white girl. Like, please don't make me go. Like, I can't. I don't put that on. I don't have that. And it's like, no. They say you're great. They say you're perfect. And in and out. And just like that sort of shame of like, why do I feel like I'm putting on a black mask for you? I'm not your black puppet because I look like it. Who am I? What do I get to provide? What do I get to do? Or what is my actual story? And maybe that's part of my history, but that's not who I am, or what I want to put forward for me myself. So that's been a big lesson for me. Also, to never go to dance calls, because I can't do those.
But also, like one of those things that was interesting too is that realizing as I was coming up through theater school, how many black playwrights there were, or how many playwrights there were of color, and seeing that our community might have been limited, and especially in Canada, because the way with our grant system works, they really want the works to be Canadian. So like, even though I would love to do more August Wilson in Toronto or in Canada, one of those things that really kind of prevents against it is the funding programs being like, we want Canadian content. Well, no.
Neither is Tennessee Williams or Eugene O'Neill.
But but like, but yeah, it's especially, well, it's for those new stories. They're like, yeah, is it a new Canadian work? No, it's an American one. Okay, so then what that then requires of us then is to be creative ourselves, to start to writing down our own stories. And that's one thing I keep saying to anybody who's coming up is like, be creative, be proactive. If you could write. If you have a collective group of people that you like to create with them. Do it. Just get out there and do it yourselves, so that whatever you're creating could be the next big thing. And we need to hear your voice. We need to hear that voice because it hasn't been heard yet. Or some people just aren't listening to it yet. So keep creating, keep pushing things out to push those boundaries.
I have a follow-up question to that. Just how are you defining classics? Since I know you said the Stratford Festival is usually 10-stage classics. So how are you defining classics, and how might that definition limit the types of material that you do end up staging?
In fairness, we have a pretty broad definition of classics, but it is absolutely true that the Stratford Festival has no track record of doing any of the great American black playwrights. And there's no reason that they wouldn't fall within what we consider the classical umbrella at Stratford. And I can't tell you why those choices have been made. I don't actually know the answer.
Come to Stratford. Come to town.
You can write to me. I'll pass it along. You know, it's interesting. There's even August Wilson, who I think, you know, there's no question is one of the great contemporary playwrights. is very rarely done in Canada. So there's one of our neighboring theaters in London, Ontario is called The Grand, and they're doing a production of Fences next year. And it conflicts with the beginning of our rehearsal period, and it's turned into sort of a big scheduling challenge for us because a lot of the black artists that work at Stratford every year really want to be part of this production of Fences because it's not an opportunity they get very often. So we're desperately trying and find ways to work around the schedule of this other show so that they don't lose that opportunity and also don't lose their slot at Stratford next year. But the fact that it's such a rare opportunity to be in a professional production of Fences in Canada says a lot in and of itself.
You know, Dartmouth hosts, I think it's annual now, has been for some years, the Black Theatre Forum, or what's it called?
Never heard about it.
No.
You mean the Black Theatre Summit?
The Black Theatre Summit, which
It's the first. Well,
It's
the
the first
second.
time in 20 years.
Yeah, no, 2 years will be the second.
right. Okay. Oh,
But now it's going to be annual.
so it's not annually. Okay.
No.
All right. But maybe maybe there's something in the future of our collaboration here that could move this along. You know,
Absolutely.
Get some Stratford people down here next time that there's a Black Theatre Summit, and maybe take some of that up to Stratford.
Yeah, that'll come back, right?
I mean,
Keep hosting us. and we'll
We hope
come.
so.
Yeah.
I think Coriolanus is very much intended as a platform for hopefully a longer term collaboration and more partnership between Stratford and Dartmouth. I should also say, when I worked in the States and we talked about diversity on our stages, I felt like we were almost exclusively talking about black people. And the Canadian discussion of diversity is
A lot more open.
broader, which is both good and poses a lot of challenges. We're working hard to find opportunities or make opportunities for more Indigenous artists in Canada. There's a huge East Asian population in Canada that's terribly underrepresented in all of the performing arts. And we take baby steps with different communities on different productions, but it can be very hard to get momentum because we're trying to cover a lot of ground.
But it has been 12 years since Harlem Duet, so it's about time, I think, for a black play. At Stratford.
Claire, did you have something before?
I'm following up on an earlier question about taking these bold steps, in how to approach casting. And I was thinking Stratford is a repertory company as opposed to individual productions. And I was wondering, how does that dynamic support this kind of change, these kinds of changes, because these artists are working together, they know one another, there's a level of trust and all sort of being on the same page and getting the bigger arc of what's going on. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
I think that's the beautiful thing with Stratford is that it allows the opportunity for you to see a diverse amount of people in a diverse amount of roles. So it also opens up your eyes of like, well, okay, fine, I can see him as Coriolanus, but like, did you see him as something else? Like, did you see him as Brigadier Chappa in like an Italian play? Like, no, maybe you wouldn't expect André to play both Coriolanus and an officer in an Italian classic, but that's the beauty of Stratford's setup and the diversity of the plays that they do bring, and bringing in an Italian story and bringing in a Shakespeare at the same time is, okay, so this is what we're doing this year. How can we shuffle those expectations and surprise the audience that maybe is coming for one thing and sees another, and their whole view is opened up in another way that they didn't expect walking into an Italian De Filippo play. That's the beauty, I think.
André, you've done 2 repertory companies.
Yeah. My history here, or not here, in Stratford has been mainly Shakespeare. Yes? Yes. Yeah. And then at the Shaw Festival, Weirdly enough, I've only understudied in a Shaw play, so my track record there has been my first year there. I did the Tony Kushner play, the Intelligent Homosexual's Guide to Capitalism, Socialism with the Key to the Scriptures, and then my second year was what I called the Black Track, which was the Adventures of a Black Girl in Her Search for God, and then Master Harold and the Boys. And then last year, which was an interesting year of doing Madness of George III, paired alongside with An Octoroon. So, talking about like taking on 2 years of racially charged plays, and as I was talking to some of these guys downstairs, like Master Harold and the Boys and An Octoroon, really trying to do the same thing, but in two different ways. Master Harold trying to get to the heart of it, to get you to fall in love with these guys, and An Octoroon to really just shake people up and be like, what do we have to do to open your eyes? Open your eyes, please. But also seeing the different range of plays that you can take on. So, as I was, like last year was a year of where I spent a duration of playing 6 different characters in 2 different plays, and British accents in one, and deep South American white slave owner in the other. But like that, I was saying, like, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to open your eyes? Do I need to go into whiteface to speak these words to you for you to actually hear them? Because as soon as somebody else might say them, you might not, you'll just let them gloss off. But are you hearing them now that I'm saying them? But yeah, and also trying to take on that same sort of approach with me stepping back into Shakespeare as Coriolanus or as Sebastian in The Tempest, and at one part of The Tempest, as we were talking earlier on, one of Sebastian's lines was basically along the lines of saying to his brother, you married your daughter off to an African, as opposed to blessing her with our Europe. And seeing the complexities and the shadism of where sometimes as a black person you feel like you made it. And you're just like, okay, we're going to try ignore that group of people now, and let's focus on the group that's made it somewhere, as opposed to, you know what I mean? So it's, and that conflict is also there too. So figuring out if you're willing to take on that challenge as at the same time as the other one. I might be talking in circles, but it's, I guess, just really trying to.
It's the beauty of the balance.
Beauty of the balance. You have to play with Shakespeare's text and bounce around with some racially charged plays and some where I got to play last year as well, the Prime Minister of England, Prime Minister Pitt, which was an interesting dynamic to go between those two plays. And
So you drive into Niagara-on-the-Lake, where the Shaw Festival is, and you see Andre's face on the theater and half white face with a mustache painted on, and you're like, whoa, okay, this is going to be a racially charged play. And then you walk into the Madness of George the next day, and you're like, oh my God, he's back. But like, what is it? Oh, this is completely different. You get to catch people off guard, and it's not I just do the black play over I do both. And that's the great thing about both festivals is you might expect the one, but we get the chance to just flip that, and maybe people see it and maybe they don't. Maybe they have no idea, and they just walked into the theater the next day and they go, oh my goodness, he's doing a British accent. What's happening? He was speaking a southern drawl the other day.
yeah.
it's an amazing opportunity, really, that they let us stretch that and get to prove things, maybe unknowingly, but wonderfully so.
I think we're about 30% overtime already. This is one of the first events of the Stratford Festival's Dartmouth residency, which culminates in 6 performances of Coriolanus at the end of this month. I hope you'll all be there. Thank you for coming tonight.